Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I want to talk about the super soldiers, the 20 and back, the Galactic Federation, um, what really all of that entails, and what I know about it. So, I'm going to share a video with you. I'm going to do a share screen, share a video by one of my more um, favorable YouTube channels that I like to watch in my free time, just because he does a great presentation. Um, and he has a goldfish for his sidekick, which is hilarious. So it's called the Y Files. Please go to their channel and subscribe. Like, they are totally awesome and fun to watch and very informative, very educational. So I'm going to actually use a bit of his information in order to better share the information that I have with you. Okay.
Kuiper Belt is a donut-shaped region of space way out on the far end of the solar system, and it is a huge region of space. Its inner edge begins at the orbit of Neptune at about 30 AU from the Sun. Now, 1 AU, or astronomical unit, is the distance from the Earth to the Sun. So the inner edge of the Kuiper Belt is about 2.8 billion miles from the Sun. Then it extends for about another 4.5 billion miles. Now, beyond the Kuiper Belt is a structure called the Oort cloud, and that place is way farther, much bigger, and really strange. We'll cover the Oort cloud in another episode. Now, the existence of the Kuiper Belt was first hypothesized in 1943 by Irish astronomer Kenneth Edgeworth. He felt there was a reservoir of comets and asteroids residing in the solar system beyond the planets. Edgeworth was right, and the Kuiper Belt was finally visually confirmed in 1992. David Jewett and grad student Jane Liu discovered the first Kuiper Belt objects, or KBOs. Now, KBOs are the various comets, dwarf planets, asteroids, and other icy bodies that make up the Kuiper Belt. Jewett and Liu named their discovery as a tribute to Gerard Kuiper, who's considered to be the father of planetary science. Before he proposed the concept of the Kuiper Belt in 1951, he'd already discovered the moons of Neptune.
Oh, did he look at Uranus?
Are we gonna do this every time?
What? I just want to know if this scientist was interested in Uranus.
He was.
Yeah,
He's the one who discovered its moons.
yeah. If you look close enough, you'll see plenty of stuff around Uranus.
Okay.
Hey, ladies, if a man is willing to give you the moon and the stars, the least you could do is give him Uranus.
That's enough.
Oh, gotta love
We've
him.
been aware of the Kuiper Belt for a long time, but didn't realize it. Pluto is actually a KBO, and one of the largest of the dwarf planets at 1,500 miles. It even has its own moons, which is probably why astronomers called it a planet for so long. In the more than 30 years since its discovery, the Kuiper Belt is still a mystery.
The Kuiper Belt is truly a frontier in space. It's a place we're still just beginning to explore, and our understanding is still evolving.
Along with countless comets and asteroids, the Kuiper Belt is home to at least 7 dwarf planets, most of which are roughly 600 to 900 miles in diameter. Eris, discovered in 2005, is the most massive object found so far, and new KBOs are discovered all the time. Now, most of the objects found in the Kuiper Belt are easy to explain. They're easy to identify, and they're easy to track. But there are things in the Kuiper Belt that don't act like science says they should. They're unpredictable, they're unnatural, and some would say they seem almost intentional. These Kuiper Belt objects challenge our understanding of the solar system, and whether we're the only ones here. On May 12, 1994, Michael Irwin and Anna Zhitkov were working late.
Yeah, and the shit cough?
Anna Zhitkov.
What I say?
They were the on-duty astronomers at the Roca de los Muchachos Observatory in the Canary Islands. It was a quiet night like any other night. And then they spotted something. It glowed and then dimmed. It glowed and then dimmed. This was different than any other object around it. It glowed and dimmed in a regular rhythm. every 5.5 hours, which by space standards is fast, insanely fast, too fast. So fast, the centrifugal force should rip a regular KBO apart. Most Kuiper Belt objects are bits of dust and ice. They shatter like glass. Anna and Michael had never seen anything like this. According to science, this object shouldn't even exist. This gave the astronomers an ominous feeling. Current technology didn't allow them to get a good enough look to fully identify it. So they named it after the Welsh god of the underworld, Arawn. 23 years later, technology caught up. We were finally able to get close enough for a look. In April 2016, NASA's New Horizons mission reached the Kuiper Belt. Next stop.
Now, this right here is the part that I need you to really pay attention to, because this is the volley to lead us up to the whole 20 and back program, the Galactic Federation, the Dark Federation, the Council of Nine, all of that, right? Like, you got to understand a little bit of history in order to understand that this is real stuff, okay?
Arawn. It was on the way to Pluto, the perfect flyby opportunity to answer a decades-old question. What the heck is this crazy spinning object at the end of the solar system? But just as New Horizons moved in for the close-up, things went dark. Nothing worked. There had been what's called a CPU safing event that put New Horizons into safe mode. Safe mode shuts down all essential systems and is triggered automatically when the spacecraft detects something unusual. But the team was stumped. After a few hours of the craft running in safe mode, one NASA engineer approached his supervisor with a terrifying idea. The engineer looked around as if to reveal a secret and then quietly said, "It seems like someone is jamming the signal," as if they were aware of our presence and didn't want us to see what they were doing. And the way Arawn spun, that insanely fast 5.5 hour rotation, no one had figured that out yet in over 20 years since first seeing it. And those who tried to understand the spin agreed. Arawn's movements seemed artificial. It was creating its own gravity within the interior of the object. Now, the concept of spin gravity wasn't new to NASA. NASA started experimenting with artificial gravity in the 1960s. Experts have developed ideas for space stations filled with small towns and farms and parks. The space station could be designed as a giant spinning cylinder. Each of these structures could rotate to create artificial gravity along the inner surface. We've seen this concept in science fiction over and over again, but science fiction is about as far as these ideas have gotten. Test results on artificial gravity are always the same. Humans are not well suited to it. When exposed to artificial gravity, we're subjected to what's known as Coriolis force deviation. This causes motions going in a straight line to bend, often quite a lot. Coriolis causes motion sickness and all sorts of other dysfunctions. Humans living in artificial gravity do not do well. Basically, we puke and die. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that vomit on a space station is a problem. But Arawn was spinning in a way that seemed like someone was controlling it. And if there is someone controlling the object, they don't want to be seen. And of all the places in the solar system, the Kuiper Belt is the best place to hide. The Kuiper Belt is 30 to 50 times farther away from the sun than we are. At that distance, things get really dark. Also, the Kuiper Belt is littered.
Now, I just want you to think about that for a moment. He is explaining to us that there is something in the Kuiper Belt that is being intelligently controlled, right? It's not just a rock or something out there, okay? And it's not ours. It's not ours.
With random, oddly shaped objects. It wouldn't be hard to hide. amongst the mess. These were the kinds of questions being asked when New Horizons went dark. Now, after a while, the spacecraft drifted away from Around. Suddenly, New Horizons came back to life, booted up, and the journey into the Kuiper Belt continued as planned. But what just happened? And how did it happen? But before these questions could be answered, someone realized Around wasn't alone in its odd behavior. New Horizons was surrounded by KBOs acting strangely. It was like something was bending the laws of physics. And the deeper New Horizons moved into the darkness, the more they realized they weren't alone.
Here it is. Here it is.
According to the Nemesis theory, we live in a two-star or binary solar system. Our sun, the only star we can see, has a companion star.
What was that? Let's listen again. Listen closely.
In its odd behavior, New Horizons was surrounded by KBOs acting strangely. It was like something was bending the laws of physics. And the deeper New Horizons moved into the darkness, the more they realized they weren't alone. According to the Nemesis theory, we live in a two-star or binary solar system. Our sun, the only star we can see, has a companion star, a brown dwarf residing deep in the Kuiper Belt. Brown dwarfs are actually called failed stars. They're huge objects, about 80 times the size of Jupiter, but they don't have enough mass to ignite their hydrogen cores, so they don't burn, they don't shine. But in the depths of the Kuiper Belt, a brown dwarf would be invisible. This object is known as Planet X, or Planet 9.
No, Nibiru.
Right,
Nibiru.
some people think Planet X is Nibiru, home of the Anunnaki.
Still waiting on that Anunnaki episode, Chief.
I'm working on it. Planet X lies well beyond Pluto, extremely far away. But this enormous object is still close enough to influence the orbits of the outer planets in our solar system and everything else in the Kuiper Belt. Now, it sounds like science fiction, but it's not. NASA has been actively searching for Planet X for decades. Now, if it's out there, it would explain why some Kuiper Belt objects act so weird. But Planet
It totally explains all of it. And it's actually closer in our inner solar system now than they want you to know.
X doesn't explain all KBOs. Along with Around, there are a few KBOs that make no sense at all. Meet KBO 2008 KV42, a comet within the Kuiper Belt. KV42 is nicknamed
Like a big
Drac,
mosquito.
after Dracula, as vampires have the ability to walk on walls.
So this comet walks on walls?
Sorta, yeah. Everything in the
Fun little side note. Vampires are on the list of 57 known species to the NSA. And actually, that was 17 years ago. And now they have a list of 87 instead of 57.
in the solar system moves around the sun in the same direction. This is called prograde orbit. And if you look at the orbits of all the objects from the side, they're basically on the same flat plane. This is called the plane of the ecliptic. So you remember how Dracula can walk on walls? That's what Drac is doing with its orbit. Drac moves in total retrograde, in the opposite direction of everything else. And it ignores the plane of the ecliptic. It's just out there doing its own thing. And Drac ain't small. This comet is 30 miles across. If it hit Earth,
It's 30 miles across. Now, I just want to pause there for a moment and have you think about this. They said that this Nibiru and all of its planets that follow it are in an elliptical orbit that is going retrograde. Now, I'm sure you've heard astronomers talk about Mercury going retrograde or Venus going retrograde or whatever. What's making them go the opposite direction? Has to be another celestial body pulling against their natural direction of rotation. Wouldn't you think? Makes sense to me.
To hit Earth, it would cause an extinction-level event. Actually, Drak could destroy the Earth entirely. Now, thankfully, Drak's orbit is about twice as far as Neptune, but we're still keeping an eye on it. Now, new photos of the outer bands of the Kuiper Belt are coming out all the time thanks to the James Webb Space Telescope. But what we're told and what we're shown is incredibly controlled. On this channel, we've proven that NASA alters images before releasing them to the public. We've talked about plenty of NASA's bizarre comments and outright lies. Then every so often, we're teased with headlines about potentially science-changing discoveries.
Bizarre object 10 million times brighter than the sun defies physics, NASA says.
NASA's James Webb Space Telescope may have found early galaxies that shouldn't be there.
Webb telescope spots strange objects in the Orion Nebula. They aren't planets or stars, and according to the astronomers who found them, they shouldn't exist.
Strange circles seen in space baffle scientists.
Even though these are all legitimate news reports covering official NASA press releases, they're meaningless clickbait. When the press asks for specific data on their investigations, NASA spits out overly scientific jargon. None of it means anything. But despite all these efforts to suppress information, there are a few brave people coming forward with very interesting new information. These people know a lot about the Kuiper Belt. How do they know so much? Well, because they were there.
That's right. Super soldiers.
Rebecca Rose was only 4 years old the first time it happened. She woke up from a deep sleep with a sense she wasn't alone. She tried to move, to cry out. She couldn't. She was paralyzed. Several strangers were in her bedroom. They hovered silently over her bed, but she couldn't make out their faces. Then there was a flash of blinding bright light and the rush of cold air. For a brief moment, Rebecca felt weightless. When her eyes adjusted, she realized she wasn't in her room anymore. She tried to move, but she was still paralyzed and now strapped to a metal table. The room was sterile and metallic, with strange equipment hanging on the walls. The air was warm, humid, and thick with a pungent medicinal smell. She spotted a figure in the corner, one of the strangers, the tall one, she called him. Though his mouth didn't move, she heard him say, "You are in no danger. We just want you to play." Rebecca was confused. Then the stranger gestured to a small table on the other side of the room. There were books, puzzles, and all kinds of games. Some games tested logic, some tested math, some tested visual comprehension and memory. For what felt like hours, Rebecca solved what puzzles she could. Then the stranger approached, smiled at her, and everything once again went white. Rebecca opened her eyes and saw she was back in bed, and just in time for school. As far as she knew, she was unharmed, except for a persistent nosebleed. Rebecca went to school like any other day. The memories of her experience faded quickly, like when you lose the details of a dream. So by the time Rebecca was being tucked into bed that night, she barely remembered anything at all. She peacefully drifted off to sleep, but soon she'd realize this was only the beginning. The strangers kept coming back, night after night, and Rebecca would take tests and solve puzzles, night after night. As these experiences became more routine, and as she got older, Rebecca was able to learn more about what was happening to her. First, her playroom, or whatever you'd call it, is on a base on the moon. From her window, she could see a sprawling complex of buildings built into the familiar white cratered landscape. And eventually, Rebecca realized the strangers weren't human. She was being abducted by aliens, aliens of many different races. She saw mantids who resembled large praying mantises. She mostly saw aliens that we would call Greys. During one of her sessions, the Greys activated Rebecca's psychic abilities. All humans have this gift, but very few of us have access to it. The puzzles and tests Rebecca had been taking over the years were actually a psychic training program to teach Rebecca
To teach her, to enhance her naturally God-given, nature-born psychic gifts that for the majority of our populace lays dormant. They don't teach us how to access it. They don't teach us how to believe in it any further. And it's like any other muscle or gift. If you don't use it, you lose it. Please pay attention.
Rebecca had to access and control her psychic abilities. Once Rebecca became skilled in telepathy, she was forced to telepathically interface with beings who were being held captive on the base. Some of the beings looked human, others didn't, but she was able to feel that they were all sentient and aware of what was happening to them, and she could sense they were all terrified. Through the telepathic interface, Rebecca extracted DNA samples. For what purpose, she didn't know, and she didn't ask. After 4 years of intense training, Rebecca was summoned to a meeting. She saw mantids and greys, but she also saw men dressed in military uniforms. They sat her down and said, "Rebecca, your training is over. You're ready." Rebecca asked, "Ready for what?" They finally told her why she'd been visiting the moon base for the last 4 years, and why she was taken from her family, why she had to interface with alien species, and why she was taught to develop her psychic powers. They said, "Rebecca, you're joining the Dark Fleet." After her training, 9-year-old Rebecca Rose was
And I just want to interject right there and clarify the Dark Fleet sounds ominous, but the dark and, perhaps could be perceived that way. Um, I'm not disputing that. I just want to also inform you that that is not really any different than our black budget projects that are carried out by our tax-paying dollars. Okay? Just so you can understand where to categorize it, if you will. Because this is legit stuff. And this man AJ that does this channel, he does a good job of showing the debunking conspiracy side of things as well, which is very beneficial to keeping his channel going because that kind of stuff is very real, very heavy, and very closely watched.
was taken from her home for the last time. She was brought to the Great Lakes Naval Station and put through trauma-based mind control programming. This was done using
MK
techniques perfected in the CIA's MK Ultra project. Next, she's strapped to a seat and sent through a jump gate. Jump gates are portals that can transport people and objects across huge distances instantly.
Now, on any of my videos that you may have watched from yesterday, I made 4 videos yesterday. In at least one of them, maybe 2, I was speaking of jump gates, jumping into a timeline, a specific timeline. This is a very real thing. So I want you to keep that in mind. We're also going to cover looking glass technology in the next video, but I want you to keep that in mind as you go through this and learn about this information, because the gist of this is that it's called the 20 and back program because they keep you for 20 years. They enlist you for 20 years after investing in your training. And when you're done and you get to come back home, they literally put you back in the timeline that they plucked you out of to begin with. And that sounds like complete sci-fi bullshit, right? But from my awareness, my knowledge, and of my research to validate my memories, this is a very real thing.
Instantly. Rebecca would now begin her 20-year mission, and so she jumped.
I also just want to add to this too, just for context purposes. that this is very similar to what all of the star seeds or volunteers have done. I mean, it's identical to what they've done. The only difference here is that it wasn't forced on any of us, and it wasn't a 20 and back kind of a program. It's a stay till you're done kind of thing, or stay till you want to be done, because that choice is up to us too. We can go back before it's finished. We can go back when it's finished. We can go back way later after it's finished if we choose to. So, same concept.
For the next few years, Rebecca spent most of her time on air patrol. The Mars Defense Force used retrofitted helicopters to protect the area around the Darkfleet base on Mars.
Protect the base from what?
Indigenous Martian life, like the mantids and reptilians.
Lizard Martians?
Yep.
Yep.
Primary mission
You
was
heard
to
him.
protect the base, but if she could capture an alien to acquire its technology, that would be even better.
Oh, it's very hard to snatch a lizard Martian. They're crafty.
Well, that may be true, but Rebecca was given cybernetic enhancements to turn her into a super soldier. Enhancements focused on optimizing physiology, enhancing psychic abilities, increasing durability, and combat effectiveness. She also had advanced armor and weapon systems directly integrated with her body and her cybernetic technology.
This is one tough broad.
She was. Because of her cybernetic systems and enhanced abilities, Rebecca was an extremely valuable asset to the Mars Defense Force. Maybe too valuable.
Wait, what do you mean?
Toward the end of her 20-year tour, Rebecca was sold to the Draconians.
Not the...
Now, I'm just going to pause the storyline right there again to remind you as well, if you're familiar with Laura Eisenhower. She too was part of a Mars drafting program where they wanted her on Mars doing work, right? Specific work. There have been numerous people way before Corey Good ever came on the scene, if any of you are familiar with him, who have claimed this exact same scenario happened to them, including Laura Eisenhower.
The Draco.
And the Dracos are on that list too, by the way.
Beyond the Kuiper
I'll
Belt
hush
is
now.
Planet X, the brown dwarf, and Planet X is ruled by the Draconians. The Draconians are a powerful reptilian species. They're the most ancient race in the solar system. They control large bases and ships throughout and beyond the Kuiper Belt. And the Draconians are to be feared. First of all, they're intimidating to look at. Most Draco are over 20 feet tall with wings. They have the ability to paralyze people just by looking at them. Here's how another soldier described one.
Without any warning whatsoever, we were all paralyzed. No one could even talk. I was instantly nauseated, wanting to both throw up and crap all at once. It felt very violating what was unfolding. I didn't get any of it, and even more disturbing,
Sorry.
it was all mental. I heard a voice inside of my head, a very loud, deep voice, frightening as hell. Up until that point, all of my telepathic encounters were of a normal exchange. Felt much like the volume and intensity of my own thoughts. This was anything but.
But the biggest reason
Now, I am going to interject one more time. Well, probably more than once. But here again, because I have my own personal experience with this exact type of species, that, in my opinion, out of all aliens that I did believe could be real, it wasn't them. I never in a million years wanted to believe that anything like that could exist. And trust me, I know how it sounds to people to say it. But I was actually assaulted by one of those exact types of species. And it is more of a mental assault than the physical. And somehow within the training that I experienced as a young girl, I had the mind power and the wherewithal to keep him from penetrating my brain and my knowledge, because that's what he wanted. That was the real reason he was there, was to infiltrate basically my data bank in my brain, right? All of my files of information. And this was after my house had been ransacked and motherboards copied and tagged, phones tapped, white vans sitting outside of my house almost daily, helicopters flying over top of my house very low and scrambling our signal, helicopters coming down toward the windshield of my car to scare me as I'm driving down the highway. And clearly, whatever they were looking for, they weren't finding. And then that incident happened. And I withstood it, and he left empty handed. He did not get what he came there for. He took advantage of something else, but that was to be a distraction, to make my mind weak. And it didn't. It didn't work on me. And he was furious. He was absolutely furious at the fact that he could not penetrate my my vault. I had a vault totally sealed shut. He could not get in my brain. And it pissed him off.
Reason to fear the Draco is technology. They've mastered advanced holographic technology, psychic manipulation, and portal tech far beyond anything humans have. So Rebecca was sold to the Draco as part of a diplomatic trade package. Basically, take our best soldiers and please don't kill us. Draconians use their advanced technology and psychic powers to dominate worlds through fear and force. They had built an empire as slave traders, and Planet X is their homeworld. If the Draco demand a few human soldiers as tribute, you have no choice but to comply. So Rebecca was put to work as a patrol pilot once again, but this time she was protecting a large ship that was orbiting Planet X. Her time serving the Draco was very traumatizing. She was forced to kill non-threatening beings. Her life was brutal, but she had her training and she had her cybernetic enhancements to keep her going. But there was light at the end of the tunnel for Rebecca. Her 20-year commitment was about to end. There was a roar in her ears.
Before we get to the finale of her story, and before you forget that he just said that she was actually on board a ship that orbited around Planet X and protected it. And a lot of people, I'm sure, are scrambling in their brain to wrestle with the notion that if Nibiru exists, if Planet X exists, if we're in a binary star system, how does that mean that the Anunnaki are the reptilians? So I don't have that literature here to show you, but I am reminded of the Emerald Tablets that were written 10,000, 11,000 years ago by Thoth, who clearly says within the Emerald Tablets that there will come a cyclical time when they return, they being the reptilians, a cyclical time that they will return, and that our only hope of defeating them is to find the now buried spaceships that have the technology and the equipment and perhaps weaponry upon them that are hidden in the sands within the Middle East. And then we also, and I know this sounds like a conspiracy, and I'm not trying to mean for it to sound like a conspiracy. I truly want you to think for yourself for a moment and ask yourself, what did our military do and confiscate when we invaded Iraq, or when we invaded Saudi Arabia, or when we invaded Afghanistan? And why is it that now they're trying to strongly influence the Egyptian government to shut down the pyramids of Giza from allowing anyone from the public in them at all, under some bogus story that now all of a sudden they're not stable anymore for anyone to go inside of them? It's not safe. I mean, you need to like ask yourself why? Why would all of that be happening? All of those things be happening if there isn't truth to this? And that the Lizzie people really do exist and really did come from this system that's within our own system. And the ancients even wrote of them and called them Quasiquotl, or the Naga, or the serpent people, or built serpent mounds to represent them, or worship the dragon, and so on. Because it's a worldwide thing, and it's not a phenomenon. It's not.
A flash of bright light and the familiar feeling of weightlessness. Then, silence. Then Rebecca heard birds outside, children playing. She was back home. And not just back home on Earth, she was back in her 9-year-old body. All the memories of her last 20 years started to vanish.
Whoa, was this all a dream?
Nope. The memories were real. They were fading because the Dark Fleet was wiping her brain. But in 2012, at age...
And I'm again going to interject here and say, from my own personal experiences, by the time I was 9 years old, I was having these strange flashes of memory of being a young adult doing reconnaissance missions, and had went through some level of defense training and psychic training on my own, and never could understand why until I started learning about MK Ultra and these different programs. And yeah, there are such things as double agents in the real world, and it's not a secret that the governments of our world have been looking for the naturally gifted children and the starseeds, even as adults. That was the whole point and reason for MUFON, Opus, Mr. Bigelow, and company to do the research study on light workers and star children from the MUFON members. They were still looking for us, even as adults.
age 40, Rebecca suffered a freak accident, and then all the memories came rushing back. But she wasn't alone in her experience. Many other people have come forward, all describing similar childhood experiences: the abduction, the training, the deployment to various bases, and the 20-year commitment. The whistleblowers call the program 20 and Back. These children are forced into a slave-like warrior state. They're genetically engineered over their entire lives. They endure physical and psychological abuse that we can't imagine, and suffer in ways that would cause most people to break. All this suffering for a 20-year space program, or a dark fleet controlled by the US Navy, but ultimately to serve the Galactic Federation. Scientists still don't know why the New Horizons spacecraft shut down when it approached Orion in the Kuiper Belt, but the survivors of the 20 and Back program, they know why. Humans are not allowed out that far. The human race is permitted to travel to the edge of the Kuiper Belt, but no farther. The entire solar system may belong to us, but everything else, it belongs to the Draco.
Yep. Because that's what
There are many people who
they are, much like we think of the Romans from history, right? They're very dominating and controlling and want to take over every system and every possible planet and species that they can for their own benefit, right? And I mean, even in the stories of uh, the Sumerian gods, we're told that, um, well, it says in that they created us, and I don't believe that. I think they just came and commandeered us to be their slaves. Now, did they take one species of human that was already here and add some splices of their DNA to make an enhanced version? Yeah, very possible. It's even being scientifically proven at this point that some of our evolution happened on a side splice within our DNA rather than through natural processes. So, yeah, highly likely that they did just that to create this perfect race of slaves. And what does that mean exactly? Well, probably that they put some type of God marker in us, God gene, or some other form of way to control us, or they turned off genes in us that were naturally um, accessible before. Hello, all of our intuitive DNA that we don't use these days and haven't for hundreds and hundreds of years now. They could have very well been the ones responsible for turning that off and causing it to lay dormant, and us having all of this quote unquote junk DNA that we don't use, let alone the amount of brain space that isn't being used, right? We only use, like, what is it, 10% of our brain? Because we're not using all of our faculties and gifts that are natural to us, our psychic abilities. That shit runs a whole host of programs in the brain.
who claim to be veterans of the 20 and Back Space Force program. It's a complex topic and deserves its own episode. So if you'd like to see that, let me know. But I will
Agreed.
cover this in more detail on the podcast. So is the 20 and Back story or the Dark Fleet true? Probably not. Almost definitely not. It's hard to know for sure where the story started because there's a lot of drama around it. Most people believe it's
And here's what he's gonna set this up to where, like, Corey Good is the one that started all of this, even though he knows full well, and he's going to admit himself that this did not begin with Corey Good. He's simply trying to capitalize on it and claim it as his own intellectual property. And the only way for him to get copyrights and trademarks and claim it as his own is to say that he made up his information. And so it's part of his own creative design, right? Intellectual property. Because all these other people started coming forward, coming out of the woodwork when he opened his mouth in the modern day and started remembering who they are. And he's like, oh shit, I can't get rich off of this now if there's other people involved. So I better just say I lied and made this whole story up. And that's the way I feel about it. Because I have spoke with Corey Good. I've reached out to him multiple times, him and David Wilcock, who both only want to feed their ego. They don't truly want to help get the truth out there that everyone knows and put all of the pieces together, because if they did, they would have wanted to help me get my story out, because I have a piece to this puzzle that they're not allowing to be seen. And they're not the only ones. I've been keeping a list. I can name names. There are very famous people in this position that don't want you knowing the truth, the whole truth. They're only giving you a sliver of it on purpose. So I want to know who's in their pocket, what's in their wallet.
believe it started with Corey Good.
Between the age of 16 and 17 years old, I was transported to the moon. And after 20 years, I was age regressed back in time and then returned to civilian life.
He came on the scene around 2010 with the story of being recruited as a child into a secret space program. He made a big splash with the story and gained a large following.
Right. Blah, 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 blah. Let's get to the other people.
2017, researchers agreed that data and computer models prove with almost 100% certainty a large, secret dark planet is lurking in the distant solar system.
Although we were initially quite skeptical that this planet could exist, we've become increasingly convinced that it is
They know
out
it's
there.
there.
For the first
They
time
know
in
it's
over
there.
150 years, there is solid evidence that the solar system's planetary census is incomplete.
Drakh is also real. I don't know if it has anything to do with the draconian species who allegedly control the solar system, but Drakh does fly in retrograde.
Yep.
It's thought humans will one day turn the Kuiper Belt into a gas station, a stopping off point on our way to deep space. But for now, the Kuiper Belt is one giant mystery. Now, my gut tells me there is something important going on up there, something which influences life here on Earth. But there's no way to know for sure until we send spacecraft to the Kuiper Belt to see for ourselves. And maybe
Or
one
we-
day we'll do that.
Because it's close enough to
That
us.
is, if the Draco say it's okay.
And I fully believe you're going to see it with your own eyes before you see it through some lens of a probe.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name
Yeah, definitely go to his channel, check him out, watch his stuff, like and subscribe to his stuff. He is amazing at presenting these things. He's got a whole great team of people, like his whole family pitches in and does this with him, and it's awesome. He really is an amazing presenter. So definitely go check him out. And if you like this video presentation that I've provided for you today, I would appreciate if you give me a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and definitely share this. Let's get it spread far and wide. Let's wake people up and make them realize that this is a real thing. This is not a phenomenon. This is not conspiracy. This is like real facts. We have other things, other planetary bodies in our solar system currently and always have and always will. This is a cyclical, normal event that always occurs. It's the reason for the CIA classifying the Adam and Eve story, which I own the book too over here. The new version that he rewrote so that it could get published and released to the public in a way that was worded to not be deemed dangerous for public knowledge. So yeah, I mean, all of this is real. Draco are real. This space program is real. Soldiers are real. And why do you need to know? What can you do about it? If you truly know who you are naturally at birth, because God made us this way, you don't need the technology to beat them because the technology's in you. Every bit of the technology that you see today was reproduced and duplicated to replicate us. That's a fact. All right, till next time. And we're going to do the looking glass technology. Talk about Alice and Atlas. Stay tuned and take care.